Hey, what's up, everyone? Animal Based Dad here. Um, gorgeous, gorgeous UK morning in rural Hampshire. Just getting a bit of that early morning sunlight. Sun hasn't even come over the horizon properly yet. But yeah, getting that good early morning light to my eyes, getting that cortisol pulse going, looking after my metabolic health as best I can. So busy with this section of the book now, dealing with essential nutrients and starting to unpack essential amino acids, which is pretty good. Good few pages on that, and getting into essential fatty acids. And you'd think that it would be pretty clear in the literature as to what essential fatty acids are for human beings. Um, and you think that you would be able to list them definitively and list the best sources for them without falling prey to any sort of industrial or marketing propaganda, and how wrong you would be. The propaganda is so rife in the literature that it is actually very difficult to unpack what essential fatty acids are from a biologically or ancestrally appropriate perspective. Um, and what I mean is, when you go into it, everything is pro seed oils. Now, they'll call it vegetable oils, and indeed, most of the literature will refer to it as vegetable oils. It's not vegetable oils. You don't get them from vegetables. In fact, the term vegetable is not even a biological definition. The term vegetable is a culinary definition. It's a cooking definition. It's used to describe certain parts of plants, like roots and tubers, and even certain fruits like tomatoes. So it's not a biological definition. But yeah, so they use the term vegetable oils, but I'd caution you to look into this properly, because what you actually have is seed oils and fruit oils. Now, fruit oils have been with us for a long, long time. Stuff like olive oil, for example, where you can take the fruit of a plant and applying a bit of pressure to it, standing on it or squeezing it or milling it with a stone or something, you can release the oils from that fruit and access them. And so it stands to reason that that's been with humankind for a long time. Seed oils, not so much. In fact, we've only had seed oils for as part of food since the early 1900s. Now think about that for a second. Just think about that. Human beings have been on this planet for a very, very long time, right? Whether you're looking at that biblically or you're looking at it evolutionarily, human beings have been on the planet for a hell of a lot longer than the last 120 odd years. We've only had seed oils as part of our food since the very early 1900s. In fact, we've only had the technology and the will to extract seed oils since the mid 1800s. So we first started extracting seed oils, and we're talking about things like sunflower oil, safflower oil, rapeseed oil, or canola oil, which is the same thing depending on where you are. Talking about grapeseed oil, corn oil, like oils from seeds, right? Where we've only had the technology to extract that oil since the mid 1800s, and they were first introduced in industrial purposes. So they were introduced as part of soap making and as part of lubricant manufacture for engines and engine parts. It was only in the very late 1800s that the first forays into whether they would be edible or not were actually done. And then widespread introduction into the human diet only occurred in the early 1900s. So we've only had seed oils in our diet for the last like 120 years, right? But we've been on this planet for millennia more than that. And we've obviously succeeded for millennia before the introduction of seed oils. Now, the literature is so rife with propaganda that suggests that seed oils are the best form of the essential fatty acids available to the human that it absolutely boggles the mind, really boggles the mind how absolutely rife that propaganda is. And I say propaganda because it is. It will literally, you look at it and it will literally tell you that the best available forms of the essential fatty acids are these seed oils, which they'll call vegetable oils, and that you should stay away from saturated fats, meaning animal fats, because of the risks of cardiovascular disease and heart disease. And I mean, it's mental. It's absolutely mental when you think about it. Just take a second to think about it a bit. Think critically for a bit. We've got a source of food. Now, animal proteins are categorically our most bioavailable and nutrient dense and ancestrally appropriate form of essential amino acids. And that is dead clear in the literature. Like, there is nothing against that. Like, it really is very, very clear in the literature. The literature will then point to animal sources of proteins being tainted, quote unquote, by saturated fats. And the fear mongering around saturated fats all stems from the 1950s and 60s and 70s, where the whole cholesterol causes heart disease myth came from. And it's a myth. It's an absolute flippin' myth. It's nonsense. And it's not backed by good science. Right? So we've had decades long of this cholesterol and saturated fat is bad for you ideology, because that's what it is. It's not scientifically true. You cannot demonstrate to me in an experiment that cholesterol causes heart disease. It's all in epidemiological studies, observational studies, which are non-experimental, which cannot determine causation. They can inform hypotheses, which are then meant to be taken into experiment to be tested and found either true or false, but it never takes that step. Right? All we have is tons and tons of epidemiological plant pro bullshit, to be quite frank, that tell us saturated fat is bad for you because it causes heart disease, it's loaded with cholesterol, and therefore you should steer clear of it, and therefore you should eat these seed oils that we've only had for the last 100 years, and we have to produce using chemicals and extreme heat under industrial settings. Like, you cannot create seed oils at home. It has to go through a big factory, so it's ultra processed, and that those seed oils are the best forms of your essential fatty acids. So essential fatty acids being that they are required for proper metabolic and physiological health and function, non-negotiable, mandatory. They are required. You have to get them from your diet, and you have to get them from your diet because your body cannot synthesize them itself, either at all or at least not in adequate quantities. So you have to get them from your diet, and supposedly the best, healthiest form of them are these industrial seed oils that we've only had for the last 100 or so years. And all the literature pointing to that only appeared around the 1960s, 70s, 80s on the back of the saturated fats demonization. Now, I smell a rat, right? And I call bullshit. And so should you. Because human beings have been on this planet for millennia longer. And we've obviously been successful because here we are. Like, you and I would not be here today if our forefathers weren't healthy and virile and able to reproduce. Right? So I call bullshit. And it's a very difficult chapter in this book to unpack, because you have to sift the truth from the fiction. And it is so rife in the literature about these stupid bloody seed oils being the best sources of everything that it's very difficult to explain and to find the counter argument in the literature. Right? It's really hard to find that counter argument. And yeah, it's frustrated me a bit this morning. So I'm out here calling bullshit, getting a bit of that early morning sunlight, just getting my mindset. We'll go back in a minute, carry on with the chapter. But yeah, just wanted to unpack that thought. Like, animal fats have been with us and have been our primary source of energy for a long, long time, right? Agriculture only dawned about 12,000 years ago. And with the dawn of agriculture, we domesticated both animals and plants. Now, biologically speaking, fat is our most appropriate fuel source, right? And it comes with essential fatty acids, right? So with these compounds that we have to get in order for proper physiological and metabolic function, right? Non-negotiable, mandatory, you have to have them. If you don't have them, you develop deficiency, and that deficiency leads to disease onset and death, right? Mandatory, you have to have these essential compounds. They come in the fats available from animals, so they come in the saturated fats, animal fats, and we've been accessing that forever, like forever, so much so that we now have 4 organs that work in unison to produce the enzymes required to digest and assimilate that fat properly, right? We don't need carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are non-essential, right? There's not an essential function in the body that requires exogenous carbohydrates. And what that means is, and I've unpacked this before, but we'll just do a brief overview again. So exogenous carbohydrates are not necessary because the glucose that parts of your body need, including your brain and certain other cells, kidneys for example, they have to have glucose as a fuel source, but that glucose is provided via your liver in the form of gluconeogenesis, right, which is your liver producing glucose from protein and fatty substrates. You don't need to eat carbs to produce that glucose. This is why someone on a ketogenic diet who has extremely low to no carbohydrate intake has stable blood sugar levels. Your body produces that blood sugar in the liver and to a degree in the kidneys via gluconeogenesis, and that sorts out your blood glucose needs. So exogenous carbohydrates, meaning carbohydrates you have to eat, completely non-essential. You don't have to eat them. Fat, you have to eat. You have to get your essential fatty acids from dietary sources because, as I've said, they are essential, they are mandatory, they are required for proper physiological and metabolic function, and you cannot produce them within your own body from other substrates. You have to get them from your diet. So they're essential. That's what the term means, and it's important. Essential in the term of nutrients does not mean they're important for you. Yes, they are important, but essential means that they are mandatory and you have to get them from exogenous sources from your diet. And then we have essential proteins, essential amino acids, right? So humankind has existed for millennia getting all the essential amino acids and essential fatty acids that it needs and the energy that it needs from animal sources, right? The animal sources come wrapped up together, so you get your proteins and your fats together in your animal sources, right? Your lean steaks and your lean chicken breasts and all of this sort of stuff. Lean is only something that has become a fad since the 60s and 70s with the demonization of saturated fat. Before that, it wasn't popular for your butcher to trim off all the fat like they do in this day and age, right? If you go and you go hunting for yourself and you go harvest an animal and you start butchering that animal to pack it and bring it back home for the kitchen, the fat and the protein are there packaged together, right? That's how important they are. And they come in the same package. They come together. You don't have to go find your fat elsewhere and then add it in. Like they come together in the animal sources. What they don't do is the protein doesn't come with the carbohydrates in the animal sources. And the fats don't come with the carbohydrate in the animal sources. We have to go to other sources to find carbohydrate because carbohydrate is non-essential. So, getting back to my point, we've been on this planet for so long and we've thrived, obviously, because we've been virile and healthy enough to reproduce. And we've done so without seed oils. Seed oils have only been around for the last 100 or so years, and yet the literature is suggesting that seed oils are the most appropriate and the safest forms of our essential fatty acids, and that we should stay away from the saturated animal fats because they're bad for your heart. And that's absolute nonsense. Like, really, it's nonsense. And if you'd like to know why it's nonsense, I can highly recommend a few documentaries, right? Documentaries put together by doctors and scientists, right? So it's not a vlogger like myself. It's not someone who's looked stuff up on the internet and talking to you about it. So I'd really encourage you to look at this. So you can look at Fat, a documentary, Fat 2, a documentary, Fat Fiction, and The Magic Pill. And I would really encourage people to go and watch those. And you can find them on YouTube. They're free of charge now. They used to be paid for and hidden behind a paywall because obviously the people who produced them needed to recover the costs of producing them. They've done so now, and now they're free and available to the public. And I'd really encourage you to go and look at this and have it explained from the perspective of health professionals and scientific professionals who can unpack this point for you in better detail than what I'm able to do in the short video. But yeah, so it is absolutely mental, the amount of animal sources of food demonization in the literature. And it's all epidemiologic, it's all observational, it's not experimental. And that should tell you everything you need to know about it being complete and utter bullshit. And honestly, people, get your fat from animal sources, forego the seed oils, forego the industrially processed, ultra processed, complete utter garbage that has only been with us for the last 100 years and started its existence as a component of soaps and machine lubricants. That is not an appropriate food for humans. It's not appropriate ancestrally. It's not appropriate now. You did not evolve using those things as food, and you shouldn't be eating them. Have a great day, folks.